Will Clemson lead the ACC? And if they do, how much does that help recruiting?
Locked On presents The Portal, the daily podcast covering college football recruiting and everything NIL. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome back into the Portal Podcast, where you get your daily recruiting, NIL, and transfer portal news. I am Brian Smith, longtime recruiting analyst and writer. Thank you for making the Portal Podcast your first listen each and every day. And today's show is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when you win your first $5 bet. To help me understand everything that's going on with Clemson, and there's a lot of news to cover, we've got our guy from over here at Locked On Clemson, Morgan Thomas. Morgan, sir, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on. Excited to be a part of the show, the Portal Podcast. Pretty cool.
Yeah, appreciate it. Thank you very much. Y'all are on a heater with recruiting right now. We'll get to that momentarily, but the biggest elephant in the room, and will be for the next 5 years, I'm guessing 2030 that some of the schools will leave, is the whole ACC deal, the revamped stuff. And you can approach this as many different ways as one wants to. When you first got wind that, you're a Clemson grad, you're a fan, you've covered it, you work at a local radio station, you're the whole nine yards. When you first heard it was this quick that FSU, Clemson, and allegedly North Carolina kind of wanted to leave too for other reasons, that they were going to get a reduced opportunity to leave in 26, then it even further reduced in 2030, and they were going to get more money and all this. Did you believe it? And B, when you really read through some of it, what were your thoughts?
Well, it was really fun to be on the squad show with you. I felt like we probably should have had this show before that, because we were the two biggest beneficiaries. As you know, as everybody listening knows, you do the Florida State podcast. So with our two teams invested in that, it's a big deal. And I think originally starting out, if you go way back a couple of years ago when Florida State announced it, I said, hey, Clemson's got to get on this. Clemson's got to join them. So I like the stance that they did. I think it was a little bit slow played, because from the standpoint of the Board of Trustees, they did not want to cause too much of a ruckus. They didn't want to burn any bridges. They've been a long time, as Florida State, been a long time member of the ACC, and they still had a lot of vested interest and a lot of history there, and good history, some negative for sure too, and frustrations as well. The biggest thing is that Clemson did not want to fall behind money-wise when it came to their rivals. And it not just like, within your own conference like Georgia Tech and Florida State, but I'm talking about rivals that are getting 10, 15, $20 million more. The minute a Clemson fan hears that South Carolina and the SEC is getting 15, 20,000 or $1 million more, no way. That was never going to fly. And it was never going to happen. Clemson Nation was not going to let it happen. And the Board of Trustees were not going to let it happen either. And so they immediately got in and put their paperwork in to sue the ACC. And also, really, one of the biggest things was just to get clarity. Nobody knew anything about the grant of rights until this started. And then all of a sudden, which it's kind of a concern in itself from all angles, but there was this grant of rights and nobody knew what the number value was on it. And nobody knew what the actual stipulations were. And there was this contract that was locked and keyed away that nobody could get to. And I'm like, what is this? The Jedi archives or something nobody can ever see? I don't know. It's a made up area for sure. But to me, I think it was good because it brought some light of what the situation was. Now, I'm sure Brian, it actually wasn't a very good situation. And it seemed like, to me, there wasn't really much we could do, because it was like $700 million or something astronomical. And if you did pay it, they still got to have your media rights, which was even crazier. So you could be playing in another conference and ACC still making bank off of your media rights. So it really was very interesting. I understand why they did it, because they didn't want, there was a lot of turmoil with Maryland leaving and everything. And so they didn't want to lose any more teams. They wanted to shore it up, but it was an extremely long contract and just burdensome buyouts and media rights deals that just was not fair. And as things went on, Clemson and Florida State, rightly so, said, hey, we need to renegotiate this. I'll tell you where I was the most shocked was the day where they said, hey, a deal has been reached. And by the way, it's not a 50-50 deal. Everything that Florida State and Clemson wanted, we're going to go ahead and give it to them. That's what was shocking to me. I had no idea. I had no anticipation that they were going to say, we're going to reduce the cost of getting out of the conference. We're going to reduce it every year over year. We're going to renegotiate for a shorter amount of time. I mean, to me, it was pretty telling that they know how big of a brand Florida State and Clemson is for sure. So that was my biggest shock. Not that this whole thing was started, but just the fact that they caved to Clemson and Florida State.
Yeah, I was surprised about it. For those that haven't remembered it or haven't looked at it yet, 60% of the revenue that the teams will get from the TV now are based on the eyeballs, for lack of a better phrase. That means if you do much better with television audience, you do much better with the wallet. And we both know, I mean, it's almost neck and neck. Florida State and Clemson, depending on the week or whatever the year, they are definitively the two most profitable TV markets that the ACC has. It's not close. The next one up is Miami, and they're about a third of the way down from them. I mean, it was just over 3 million eyeballs from 2014 through 2022. This one thing that I looked at that was a long-standing that Florida State put out, and I'm like, that's a long time. So it's consistent, and it was like 3.17 million for Florida State and like 3.08 for Clemson, and then Miami was just teeny bit over 2 million. Then you had Duke at like 1.02, but yet they were still making the same money. So I understood why that mattered. And to your point earlier, like South Carolina's making a big run, and good for them. And I'm sure you're not much of a South Carolina fan by any stretch, but I respect that they've done a little better here recently. That money matters in recruiting, man, because you can dump that into facilities, NIL, keeping your coaches, bigger staff in the back office for recruiting. So I understand why Clemson's administration's like, we need to jump in with the Florida State Seminoles here. And I think it was smart. To that, one extra point here. Do you think that, especially because South Carolina is doing what they are, and it's, you're always competing with Georgia and North Carolina, et cetera. Do you think a lot of the money will go towards recruiting? Because Dabo, and we'll get into this more in just a moment, Dabo wants to recruit high school kids. Do you think that, I'm guessing 20 million a year, give or take, Clemson and Florida State once this gets rolling. Do you think they'll dump a lot of it directly into high school recruiting?
The word out on the street is, if they allow 20 million, then 18 million will go to football, 2 million will go, close to 2 million will go to basketball, and the rest will be, maybe baseball and softball, maybe women's basketball, something like that. So it's going to be heavy. If they can go, unless there's a legal challenge to that, in the courts or in Congress or whatever it may be, Clemson's going to put the max amount that they can without neglecting basketball, men's basketball, that being said. So, they're going to go heavy into football for sure. Now, how Dabo Swinney uses that is still a little bit of a mystery. But what we know from the Clemson fan base is that Dabo, his first priority is retention. That's why you don't have a lot of guys leaving. That's why you don't have a lot of replacement needed other than guys who just literally want more playing time. The guys that are getting playing time and the guys that are starters, for the most part, he is paying them their market value and maybe a little bit more. And the retention is very strong at Clemson. So there's no concern there. That is definitely priority number one. Priority number two, as we've seen and we've heard from him, is high school recruits. And Dabo uses money for high school recruits, not in a illegal way, as far as tampering and things like that. But he makes sure that the recruits know this is how much typical freshmen make at Clemson. But he'll tell you this, and all the staff will tell you this, they never lead with that. And to be honest with you, they had a huge recruiting weekend. 3 recruits told us on the radio this week, none of that was brought up until the very end, and none of it mattered at that point anyways. They wanted to be there. Their families wanted them to be there, and they had already made their decision before it was even brought up. So a lot of the core guys that are on this team, I think all have that same personality and perspective of, yeah, we know we're going to make money, and we know Dabo's going to do us right, but we already made our decision to be a Clemson Tiger before that. So I think that's kind of where Dabo Swinney does it. And then last, priority would probably be transfer portal. He hasn't always been able to use it because he's over recruited or recruited exactly the number of 85 that he could have, except for this past season where he really had openings that he could go in and get some guys that were that were starters for him.
Well, I think they've started to change a little bit, and we're going to talk about that next, how they balance recruiting, NIL, and the transfer portal. That is next here on the Portal Podcast. We're all about the stats because numbers do not lie. And when it comes to the all-new Nissan Armada Pro 4X, the numbers are on an MVP level. With the ability to tow up to 8,500 pounds, it can quite literally carry the whole team, plus the gear wherever you need to go. It's powered by a twin-turbo V6 engine, delivering the strength and performance to handle highways, back roads, and everything in between. And with room for up to 8 people, the Armada's Pro 4X is built for big crews, big adventures, and even bigger memories. Whether you're exploring off-road trails or rolling up to the arena, the Armada Pro 4X brings power, versatility, and style wherever you go. Take your adventures to new heights with the all-new Nissan Armada Pro 4X or more at nissanusa.com. This show is also brought to you by FanDuel. March Madness is here, and FanDuel is giving you the chance to get in on the action like never before. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. That's $200 extra bucks to use on everything from buzzer beaters to Cinderella stories. Picking your favorites, this is where you've got to go and look at all the different opportunities, the underdogs, who's going to win the big game that nobody else picked. Why not go and look at one of the underdogs and use FanDuel to make it happen? It's easy, it's fast, and the FanDuel app is simple to use. When you win, you get paid instantly, no waiting around. So visit FanDuel.com and get in on the college hoops action all tournament long. Clemson and NIL publicly and nationally don't always go together. There's a lot of perceptions with it. But I've heard different things from recruits. Hey, they use it. It's just not as much up front. That hurt them sometimes. That helped them other times. But they've adapted. And you mentioned just a moment ago before we went to break that Clemson will use it a little bit now with the portal. Do you think that's going to be what? 5-10% of what they're going to do? If you want to take a guess. Or is it still going to be so heavy towards the high school, it's just going to be used if they need something, like there's an obvious critical area, guy turns pro early, something like that?
Yeah, I think that the good thing is that Dabo Swinney, he may not adapt and adjust or take on new things. He's not an early adapter, if you will, in a marketing sense, especially with the transfer portal. He's a guy that's going to take a step back and look and see what's really happening. What's this really about? What are other teams doing? What's working? What's not doing? He's a very calculated guy. I mean, he didn't become one of the most successful college coaches of all time just doing things on a whim or doing what the fan base thought he should do or even what the media thought he should do. Now, I will come on record and say I thought he should have joined the transfer portal a little bit faster. And he'll tell you that he's used the transfer portal for the past 3 years. But to be honest with you, he has, but they're not starters. I mean, you know, he's gotten a couple of guys that were for sure clipboard holding guys on the sidelines to fill in some spots of need, or when they had the 84th and 85th roster spot that they had to fill in. Until this year, it has been that way. But now he's brought in some guys that we know they're not just guys that are going to sit on the sideline. He brought in Tristan Smith, wide receiver from Southeastern Missouri State, JUCO guy that could possibly get 2 years. Right now he has 1, but I know that, you know, if you're 2 years of JUCO, they're starting to let you have 2 years back. So he could have 2 years of eligibility instead of just 1. So you've got a really tall 900-yard wide receiver out there that's going to compete and is hungry. You know, he came out in the media on the radio and said that he told the team that they didn't know how good they had it, that not every school out there is eating as well as they're eating. And I think that's what you want. You know, there's a lot of concern from the Clemson stand base of we can't take any transfers because they're going to ruin the culture. Guy who comes in and says that and says, hey, I'm telling the guys around me that have been here at Clemson since day one, they don't know how good they've got it, and they need to appreciate it. Actually, that's kind of the culture that I want. I want guys that appreciate where they're at and what they're trying to get to. And so Tristan Smith in on this roster now is a good thing. Same thing with Will Helt from Purdue. Outstanding individual contributor. Purdue won one game last season. He wanted to move on to somewhere where he felt not only he could be the guy that he knows he is and that he's shown he is, but he wanted to build something more than just himself and build a team that could go to the postseason and win a lot of games. We know Clemson can win a lot of games, so he wanted to inject himself into a team that is basically ready for another postseason run and to improve that team, not just make himself look good to get to the NFL. And that's another guy where you say, hey, I want that culture for sure. And then you have Jeremiah Alexander, 5-star guy that basically left Dabo Swinney at the altar, as Dabo has said, because we had him in the bag. And honestly, the rumor is that some big time boosters came in and said, not so fast at Alabama. Now, things didn't work out for him for a couple of years. And so he gets a new lease on his college football playing career here at Clemson. And he's even come out and said, hey, you know what? I appreciate where I've been. I'm putting in everything I can. I've been here since 4 a.m., 4:30 a.m., and I'm putting in the work. And I'm going to try to show people what I really am. I'm not just a 5-star high school guy that was a bust. And so that's the kind of culture that you really want. And go back to your actual question of, pay wise, I can't give you an exact number, but I know that these guys aren't coming here for free. And we know that for sure. So they could go anywhere else. They had Texas A&M, LSU, many other SEC teams and ACC teams extremely interested in these guys. And they're not just going anywhere for nothing, right? These guys want to play and they want to get paid for it as well. I think Dabo does a good job, or he's starting to do a good job of saying, you know what? I might have to be a little bit more lenient with what we need. We know we're going into the portal and we have areas of need. So I need to let them know that, hey, you're not starting from scratch like a true freshman from high school. And hey, you know what? What's the market value for you? What can I afford to pay you? It's going to be XYZ, and this is what it's going to be. But I want you to come to Clemson because you want to be here for sure. And surprisingly enough, I was shocked. He beat out Texas A&M. They have all the money in the world, right? So it's not all about that. These players do care about it. And Will Helt mentioned, he said when Dabo Swinney FaceTimed him, that was the key for him because the other coaches had just texted or emailed, but Dabo, the head man, FaceTimed him. He felt like that was very special and showed what he really cared about for sure is that relationship piece there too. If I would tell you this, though, it goes back to what we said in segment 1. It is all about retention first. So to me, if you're already wearing the orange and white, you're getting the most and you're getting that contract and that pay first, right? And then if you're a high school recruit, we'll work out some things. And then where there's gaps and losses in recruiting, losses in the portal, critical needs like at the defensive end spot, I think Dabo has done a good job of adapting and saying, you know what, I can't keep continuing what I'm doing, losing tenured guys at the defensive line and replacing them with freshmen who haven't even been in a weight room at all. So at least a college football level weight room, right? So I think he's done a good job of adapting. Dabo's not going to be a guy that's going to get embarrassed nationally. And some of these defensive numbers that they put up the past couple of years, he was very frustrated with. And so now he's going in and being a little bit more open to bringing in guys from both player markets.
Yeah, I think that's a big part of it. And it swings to this. They put a bunch of effort like they do every year. They focus on a smaller group of high school kids. They've gotten, it's a recruiting heater, if you will, 7 commitments in less than a week. And to be really honest, they're not that it's never happened before. I don't want to, make up stuff, but at the same time, to get 7 in March, and all of them are kids that aren't just good football players. These are guys that are mostly national recruits. Caden Gebhardt was the last kid. He's from Ohio. Marcel Gibson's a kid out of Dallas, played at South Oak Cliff. He's a corner. That's a big-time player. Grant Wise was a legacy for the University of Miami. He's a center prospect out of Pace, which is just outside of Pensacola, Florida. Chancellor Barclay is one of the best offensive linemen I've seen this year at any of the Under Armour camps. Very technically sound guy, another interior offensive lineman. Florida, Miami, and a whole bunch of schools wanted him. Naeem Burroughs was a stud at the Under Armour All-American game as a junior, one of the fastest guys there. And that's, believe me, that is saying something. Connor Salmon might be even faster. He's a 10-4 guy. He's out of Maryland. I mean, this is just incredible. And to start it off, they got an offensive tackle out of Ohio and Adam Guthrie that was really good. That was just 6 days ago. So let me ask you, did you guys expect this many? Or, I mean, I'm sure you knew some rumors. Okay, 2 or 3 of these guys are going to commit. That local media always hears about that stuff. But did anybody really think they were going to jump in and get 7 guys in like 5-6 days?
You know, I always try to be straight with you. No, I mean, I didn't think 7, even when we were at 6 in 5 days, that was a shock. 5 in 5 days. It was a shock when all this came rolling. Now, Dabo's been pretty good at getting 1 or 2, and I think there was a lot of frustration from 2025 because typically, and he's had some big recruiting classes that have all committed about the same time, and they, you know, kind of piggyback off of each other because they're all friends, you know, and they've developed this relationship over the recruiting process. He's had a good summers before. Early June, he got, you know, a handful of guys all at once. So I remember this happening in the past. It is unique that it happened in March. Originally, this is an elite junior day for guys, that it's an unofficial visit in the end of January. And they come in and they get their, you know, the whole song and dance, and they get a whole weekend with Dabo Swinney and pick up basketball and, you know, whatever they get to do. That's all kind of fun and games and seeing the campus and attending events and meeting the other players and all this stuff is really good time. You know, they had to move it back into, because of the playoffs and other things, they had to move it back into March. And I actually think it might've been a good thing because there's kind of a sweet spot there maybe. And I'm kind of giving this away to my enemy here in Florida State, but it seems like there's a little bit of a sweet spot there where January and bringing these guys in is kind of too early. You know, if you're mama and daddy, you're probably saying, well, son, you know, it's just January. Let's go see some more places. But for whatever reason, maybe March and middle of March is something where it's like, well, you know, we're kind of getting into 2025. You know, you got to go back and get ready for your senior year. Let's go ahead and commit. You know, it works well in the summer, and it seems to have worked really well in March for the first time for Clemson. So I don't know if all this was in the mix or not. I kind of had an understanding of Connor Salmon because he kept coming back and he kept, you know, talking about Clemson and kept visiting. The key when it comes to recruiting is follow the visits. I mean, if the guys really love where they want to go, if they really want to go somewhere, they're going to visit there. They're going to visit there with their mom, their brother, their sister, their aunts, their uncles, their nephew. They're going to go there and they're going to visit. And they're not just going to come to one game. They're going to come to 2, 3, and they're going to come on their own dime. You know, and then the legit guys are also going to get their official visit as well. You see guys who just come on the official visit and that's it. A lot of time, those are guys that just want to get that free weekend and then go back home. But guys that are invested during the season, leaving their high school Friday night to come on a Saturday to see your team, that's where it's key. And you see that on social media. How many times are they posting about Clemson or Florida State, for your example? Salmon was one. Guthrie was another. These guys Gebhardt was also talking about Clemson a ton. Those guys that want to talk about the university that they're visiting and want to come up multiple times, those are the guys that I thought, okay, yeah, these guys are definitely interested. I wouldn't be surprised. But all 7 of them definitely was a shock to me all at once. I mean, you got to think some of these guys probably want to go visit other places because Dabo Swinney does have one catch that he does with his commits. You mentioned he doesn't offer a lot of recruits. One catch is you commit. Commitment is like a marriage, right? It's like dating a girlfriend or something. It's actually something that you commit to. A lot of people forget that commit is an actual word that you want to hold to, because a lot of players, they go out and they commit and then they go visit 5 or 6 other schools and entertain other places. Dabo says, no, if you're going to commit, you can't go visit other places. Not that you can't, but if you want to, then you need to uncommit. And so these guys doing this shows that maybe they're ready and ready to build something bigger. And to me, again, it was a shock being so early.
Yeah, it really was a wild ride. When we come back, I want to finish up because we got a little spring transfer portal opportunity. Curious about what Clemson's got going on in spring ball to lead into that. That is next here on The Portal. Ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Been dining out, whether it's online shopping, entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app, it's a complete financial command center. You can track all of your accounts, investments, spending, and everything else all in one place, so you don't have to worry about managing your money, and you can actually start building wealth. Here's an example. Instead of just juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check all your finances, track spending, and even plan your long-term goals. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONCollege for half off your first year. Morgan, here for the last segment, we got spring ball. Is there any spot that you're like, okay, there's a pretty darn good chance Clemson needs at least one more guy out of the portal? For those that don't know, I think it's April 16th to the 26th, something like that. There's another 10-day window where kids can jump in after spring ball. What say you?
Oh man, that's a hard question for sure. You didn't prep me on that one.
That's right, man. I got to throw at least one curveball.
I would say, Dabo Swinney recently came out this week, and I'm going to do a podcast on it this week about he was very frustrated with the secondary. And, they've lost their key safety in R.J. Mickens, and a lot of their guys are banged up. And he seemed to be very frustrated with the backups. Now, he said, hey, I'm going to let these guys that I know, the guys that got 800 reps last season, snaps, at cornerback and at nickelback, those guys, they can sit on the bench. They can nurse their injuries or their rehab, their surgeries or scopes or whatever they had. Right. So he said a lot of his true starters are on a snap count. I understand that, but when he was asked about, well, hey, what about those backups that you're bringing in that are the younger guys from your recruiting cycles? He said, yeah, not much that he's very interested in talking about with them because they were very undisciplined, mistake prone, and just very, very not up to standard. And he called out a certain players too. I wonder if he's doing that just as coach speak to get some guys to see how they can respond. And I don't want to beat him up too bad just because, it is leading into spring break here at Clemson. So a lot of the guys are probably checked out, ready to move on and go hang out with their families or their girlfriends or whatever for spring break and go down to the beach or the lake or whatever it may be. Even Cade Klubnik was under some fire here. So maybe the quarterback position is open as well. But to me, I could see maybe the secondary. The defense is definitely one that you want to try to improve, that kind of lagged behind the most, gave up a ton of yards through the rushing attack, allowed a lot of really young running backs to just run all over them. I think they've done a good job retaining most of their defensive line, and adding in will help. So I don't necessarily think it could be the defensive line. And they also have, they brought in Jeremiah Alexander, as I mentioned. So I don't think it could necessarily be the second level at the linebacker spot. To me, I would say if it's anywhere, could be like a secondary, could be like cornerback or safety. One of those positions might be open, but Dabo's pretty full, even though they've mentioned, they fully anticipate this summer or the late spring, I guess, that the lawsuit will be passed, that they'll get an expanded roster, to 105 or whatever it is. So they don't have to hang on to that 85 after that. So, but Dabo's also really key on walk-ons, and I know we're kind of getting rid of that, right? Because we have like legit numbers. You can't have extras that are on the reserve squad that don't have anything, right? So I could see where Dabo just fills in with more walk-ons, because he was a walk-on himself and got in there and got playing time. He has a lot of really good Cinderella stories from the walk-on aspect, like the Hunter Renfrow of the world. So that's what I think Dabo would do.
Yeah, I think it's going to be selective, but my guess is now that he's had a taste of the portal, some of the guys that, like you said, the kid from Southeast Missouri State, et cetera, there's somebody for every school. And I know Dabo is very faith-driven. He's very specific on the discipline he wants, and that's great. There's somebody, but with their money and their back office staff, and he's an excellent evaluator, I imagine they're going to find at least one more guy for the defense, whether it's linebacker, safety, whatever, probably both, because somebody's going to leave too. There'll be at least one guy leaves that you don't expect. It's just part of the world.
I can see it happening for sure. We'll have to see how it all shakes out after the spring game.
Morgan, tell everybody where they can find all your work, brother.
Well, you can always follow me over on X at the Morgan T Show, and Locked On Clemson Monday through Friday. You know how Locked On rolls. We'll have a new Clemson episode every weekday, every week for you.
All right, brother. I appreciate it. You can find the Portal Podcast wherever you get your pods, on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you want to go. Thank you very much. Please like and subscribe.